when it comes to thyroid medicine, I don't see it that way. And people are surprised to hear me say that because if, wait a minute, you're a natural person, right? Like, why would you be for medicine? However, thyroid medicine is really replacing a hormone that your body needs, right?
Welcome to the Inflammation Code podcast. I have such a special guest in store for you guys today. Ina is a very special girl. I met her months ago learning about thyroid health. She is a queen of thyroid health. And we're going to get into the topic today and why so many of us are struggling when it comes to energy and a lot of other things that thyroid can affect that we may not even realize. So welcome, Ina.
Thank you so much, Shivani. It's such an honor. And thank you for that beautiful introduction.
For sure. So, Ina, I know that part of your journey is that you personally had Hashimoto's and you were told there's nothing you could do until your thyroid failed completely. And I have been to doctor's offices where my sister-in-law or my close friend was told the exact same thing. You're not full-blown yet. There's nothing you can do. When you're completely at failure, when your blood work says you're there, I have a chronic medication for you that you'll take for life. And that's the only solution I have. And so take us back to that moment, because I think every woman who listens into this podcast, woman or man, because we know thyroid issues go both ways, has had a version of that conversation with her doctor where you walk in and say, I don't feel good. Something is wrong. You're told your blood work looks fine for now, and there's nothing to do. So what did you experience and what did you decide to do?
Oh, it was a few years leading up to that until I found a doctor that actually diagnosed me with Hashimoto's, because before that, I was a lot of like, oh, there's nothing. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe it's this. Maybe you just need to exercise more. Meanwhile, I was so tired, I couldn't even do that. I had all these headaches, had so many different issues. So just finding a doctor that said, hey, I know what you have. I was so excited. But of course, that excitement was like, when they were like, yeah, you have this autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's. This was, 25 years ago, more even than that. And I thought, Hashi, what? And they're like, yeah, you have this autoimmune. I'm like, great. Like, what do we do? And they're like, yeah, nothing. Because autoimmunity is one of those things that unfortunately, a lot of providers just don't know how to support unless they're more functional. And with Hashimoto's, we know the immune system is attacking the thyroid. And over time, it makes the thyroid slow. But my thyroid at that moment was not slow. But interestingly enough, knowing what I know now, 25 years later, my thyroid was showing signs of slowing down because they're looking at very wide ranges, right? So when we test for thyroid, we look at TSH, T4, T3. I know these are all things that you've talked about on the podcast before, which are really important. But the lab ranges are going to be very wide. Like TSH, for example, the range is anywhere between about 0.5 to 4.5, sometimes even up to 5. And there are some providers these days that don't do anything unless TSH gets up to 10, which boggles my mind completely. Now, TSH is just one marker. There's many others. So there's all these things that have to happen downstream. But so often, TSH is checked. So in my case, my TSH was 3 or 4.35. Now, in my book right now, that is absolutely an issue, right? It's very close to that 4.5 end, but really, optimally, TSH should be between about 0.5, depending on if you're on medication or not, and 3. And if you're on thyroid medication, even lower than that. So I was not okay, but because it was within range, I was told it's okay. And I didn't have any type of nutrition or functional medicine training at the time, but I had enough understanding to know that this doesn't make sense to me. I was a very logical person. I still am a very logical person. And so that is when I really set out on my quest. And it took a while to find this doctor. And I was so happy that, they told me something. And then that's when I started to look and see, okay, but what can we do now? And realizing that, yeah, we can wait for my thyroid to be destroyed, but what's destroying my thyroid? The immune system, right? It's the immune system's fault that's doing that. So what do we do to get their immune system to slow down, to calm down, to balance so that it doesn't think my thyroid is this bad thing that it has to avoid? And this is the part that provider I saw was completely missing. And unfortunately, so many do as well.
It's true. And when we look at this autoimmune crisis in women, we know that approximately 8% of the US population is living with an autoimmune disease. I have some statistics here that I pulled up. I think 8% is hilarious. I bet it's like 10 times that. My statistics here say nearly 80% of the people who have an autoimmune condition are women. So I wonder if over half the population is on the spectrum of autoimmunity, and that 80% is actually a tremendous amount of women. And then when we talk about Hashimoto's, more than 10 million Americans have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and it's estimated that another 10 million are undiagnosed. So, and I bet that number is also
It
very
is
much
higher.
higher as
Yeah.
well. And so when we talk about these statistics, I looked it up and it said levothyroxine, the synthetic thyroid hormone, was the number one most prescribed medication in the entire United States in 2023. Not blood pressure drugs, not antibiotics, a thyroid pill. And so, what does that tell you about what's happening in the bodies of American women right now? Like this conversation around why are we struggling with our immune system? Why are women so affected? What are your thoughts on that?
So many. So the fact that levothyroxine is the number one medicine prescribed is not surprising because so many people have thyroid issues. Now, levothyroxine is T4. And so when our thyroid becomes slow, we actually stop to produce the hormone that we need, right? There's not enough TSH, or TSH will go up, right? Which will create an imbalance in hormones. There'll be a deficiency in T4, and the body's going to keep raising TSH so that we make more T4. But if we don't make it, we have to supplement. And speaking of medication, a lot of people say to me, well, as a nutritionist and someone who practices a more functional approach, do you believe that we should get off medicine and not be on medicine? And while, of course, there's certain medications that we want to, avoid if we can, when it comes to thyroid medicine, I don't see it that way. And people are surprised to hear me say that because if,
Sure.
wait a minute, you're a natural person, right? Like, why would you be for medicine? However, thyroid medicine is really replacing a hormone that your body needs, right? So I don't really see it as medicine in the way we may think of other types of medicines, but it's a hormone that you absolutely need. So if you don't have enough hormone, you're actually doing your body a disservice when you don't put it back, right? Because you need thyroid hormone literally for every cell in your body, from your head to your toe, and for almost every single process.
Sure.
And so the fact that, people are on, I mean, yes, they need it. That's important that they are, but it also tells us how poorly the thyroid, which is one of the most important glands in the body, is functioning, and it affects so many different things. However, there's another part to this. And this is, a lot of people get confused and they think that when they have Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune, right, that causes hypothyroidism.
Mhm.
And I ask people all the time, like, hey, what are you doing for your thyroid? What are you doing for Hashimoto's? And they look at me a little weird because of, well, what do you mean? I'm doing the same thing for my thyroid and Hashimoto's. Isn't it the same thing, right? But while it's related, it's not actually the same thing, right? Your
Interesting.
thyroid is going to become slow because your immune system is mistaking it for something bad and attacking it. Like, imagine someone literally sitting there and just punching you in the throat every single day, right? And it's damaging it over time. I mean, that's kind of, it sounds dramatic, but that's kind of what the immune system is doing. It's just like going after it and after it, after it, right? So naturally, the thyroid, when it keeps getting punched and bruised and pecked at and whatnot, it's not going to work as well. So it slows down. And so levothyroxine, and in some situations, things like armor thyroid, which is both T4 and T3, or liothyronine, which is just T3. We could talk about that after. But those
Yep.
are different medications, but essentially those are hormones, thyroid hormones that we put back so that the thyroid gets what it needs. That is very important. However,
Sure.
the other side of this is Hashimoto's, right? So in Hashimoto's, it's when the immune system is attacking. And when that happens, we have to do things to calm the immune system and teach it, hey, thyroid is good. This virus is bad, right? Or this toxin is bad, or this mercury is bad. You attack that, get rid of that, not the thyroid. So when people say that they take levothyroxine for their Hashimoto's, it's kind of tricky because you're taking levothyroxine for your thyroid because you're giving the hormones that your thyroid does not have, right? But the Hashimoto's piece of it, which, by the way, about 85 to 90% of people who have hypothyroidism have Hashimoto's, about half of them don't know it because it's not always tested in a full thyroid panel. So, because why does the thyroid become slow, right? Most of the time it's because it's being attacked. Now, there are, of course, situations where genetically it's slow, or maybe someone's exposed to radiation, or, there could be an injury to the thyroid, right, that it becomes slow. But most of the time it's slow because your immune system is attacking it. And so
Right.
the levothyroxine is helping your thyroid, but the levothyroxine doesn't really do anything for the confused immune system. Now, if there's a lot of inflammation, levothyroxine can a li- lower the inflammation a little bit, technically speaking, but generally overall, it's for your thyroid. It doesn't do anything for the immune system, which is why it's so important for us to look at both things, both the thyroid and the immune system. And going back to your original question about, what's happening, why are so many people on this medication? Well, we know that their thyroids aren't working as well, right? But then the question goes back to, okay, but why? Right? Like,
Right.
what's at the core of that? And because Hashimoto's is such a big part of slowing down the thyroid, right? The core is going to be inflammation. It's going to be that immune confusion. It's going to be the toxicity, right? It's going to be hormone fluctuations. It's going to be the stress. It's going to be so many different things that cause that immune confusion, which then in turn slows the thyroid. And unfortunately, I would say probably at least 50%, though I think it's probably more people who are on levothyroxine, right? They don't know they have Hashimoto's. And even if they do know they have Hashimoto's, unfortunately, they're not guided to properly support the immune system. So they're doing stuff for their thyroid, and then their immune system keeps breaking it up, right? And damaging it. And so they take what happens for most people is they take more and more medicine. So with every year, they may be on 50 micrograms of level. And then maybe they say, oh, you should go to 75. And then next year it's 88. And then it's 100, right? That's not that your thyroid just needs more medicine. I mean, yes, it does, but it's more that the immune system is going to continue to attack it. So it breaks down more. And then you need more medicine to bring it up. And then the immune system attacks it more. And then you need more medicine. You see what I mean?
I do. And what's so wonderful about what you just said is it finally clicked. I was sharing before we got on that I've had multiple different experts about thyroid health come on the podcast. And so if my listener today has listened to those past episodes in the first 50, second 50, always I have so many topics on women's health and thyroid is an important one. But I never quite absorbed the distinction you just said, which I probably should have beforehand. But there's thyroid conditions and there's the autoimmune aspect of thyroid conditions. And we should literally think of them differently. Because when you are supporting thyroid, just like in the perimenopause, menopause conversation right now, we're talking about our hormones tanking. And the only way to support the body is to give it the hormones. I take progesterone. I'm constantly testing and trying to prove to my doctors to give me estrogen for its protective effects. They're like, you're not there yet. You're fine. Stop it. And I'm like pushing because I'm always reading so much about hormone health. But what you just said is look, don't feel bad about the thyroid medication you're taking. It is a hormone support and thyroid support for you to have energy, to function well, for your brain to work well, all those things. And I really appreciate that because as a organic, natural girl who tries to avoid medicine, I actually have some guilt around taking Armor Thyroid. I'm like, how can it be that you teach this and you still are taking something? What a like crutch you're using. But instead, you kind of really frame that as hormone support, thyroid support. It's like just clear, give yourself the support. But then look over here. And what I also caught when you said that was, no wonder I've had the same dose for over 10 years. It's because I manage myself like an
Yes.
autoimmune patient. I've always thought of myself as you better love that immune system and gut health like it is your first job in your whole life. And so when we talk about autoimmunity from an Ayurvedic lens, we talk about how when we have these chronic and misdirected fires of inflammation, then all of a sudden the body has kind of lost its intelligence, its awareness of what's good and what's bad. And I know that you also, like me, work at those root causes of the fire. So when you look at a client who has understood that they have a Hashimoto's because they got that full panel, full diagnosis understanding, what are those buckets of triggers that you immediately start investigating to help them understand, hey, this is not just thyroid, this is bigger, and we're going to have to look at the whole picture?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to say one quick thing in case people may not know how they would get the Hashimoto's diagnosis. Your medical doctor would have to test not just your thyroid hormones like TSH, T4, T3, reverse, but they also have to test your thyroid antibodies. And for Hashimoto's specifically, it's the TPO, which is the thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and the TG, which is the thyroid globulin. So, because sometimes people come and they say, well, I don't know if I have Hashimoto's. And I said, well, have you had a full thyroid panel? They said, oh, yeah, I have. Here's my TSH, right? That's just one. That's not everything. So by looking at those antibodies is how your medical doctor would be able to diagnose you with that so that you know. And it's an important thing to ask because a lot of times the doctor will say, oh, I'll run your thyroid. But unless you ask for those antibodies, I think there's a lot of different thoughts about what a full thyroid panel really is. So you want to be really proactive with that and ask. And if that's there, which is very, very common, and sometimes it could be there when people have a lot of symptoms. Sometimes it could be there and people don't have a lot of symptoms. I test everyone, and I know a lot of functional providers test everyone for it because the earlier you find it, right, the more things that we could do to support their immune system, support that inflammation, and then we can prevent that thyroid destruction, right? Because when we talked about medicine, we take the medicine to support the part of the thyroid that isn't working, that can't produce it, right? So we don't, and I've definitely felt like you guilty in the past before I really understood it, like, oh, I'm taking this medicine, right? But it's more like, no, we're supporting what we need. And then the goal, right, isn't necessarily to get off medicine completely, but it's how do we stop the rest of the thyroid from being destroyed, right?
Correct.
And so with that, to answer your question about the triggers is that when we look at what is causing that immune confusion, there's a lot of different things and it's going to be different for different people. There's probably 100 different things. So I like to put them into buckets, right? So we have our food bucket, we have our infection bucket, our toxin bucket, and our stress bucket. So the food bucket is going to be essentially anything that you are eating that your body does not like. Now, for a lot of people with autoimmunity, and especially Hashimoto's, it can be gluten. Now, I'm not someone who likes to generalize everything because we are all different. So I don't want to say everyone should be off gluten, but about 30 to 40% of people with autoimmunity and Hashimoto specifically have the genetics to not be able to process gluten properly. And so when that's the case, even if you don't feel bad from eating gluten, those genetics are going to make it harder for you to break it down. And then what's going to happen is because your body's not meant to break it down and to digest it and to process it, your immune system is going to attack the gluten because genetically you're not meant to eat it, even if you don't feel bad from it yet, right? And then through a process of cross reactivity, it's also called molecular mimicry. And that's something that you've probably talked about in your podcast before, but it's that similarity of the molecules on gluten to the compounds on your thyroid. They're not identical, but even just a little bit of similarity can make the body become confused. And as it's attacking the gluten, say, oh, wait, what's over here? Oh, this looks like gluten. Meanwhile, it's your thyroid, right?
Wow.
And so that's what that molecular mimicry means because it's not exactly the same, but it just mimics it a little bit and the body gets confused and goes after the thyroid thinking that it's gluten.
That's horrible. That's a big deal.
And
When
not
I in the past have done Ayurvedic detoxes in my group programs, I always ask my clients, and some portion of people are like, I do not want to give up gluten. I don't want to give up the ability to process gluten. I'm like, I totally understand. I ate bread happily until I understood what gluten does to me. And what you just said is really powerful because a lot of people say, gluten doesn't really affect. And what I usually ask them to do is just give it up for 2 weeks and then bring it back. And the moment you do pay good attention and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm tired. I didn't know that my afternoon nap that I kept taking was because I ate gluten. My brain is thinking more clearly. But what you just said is another level up from that. It's not just the gut effect and it's inflammatory and it's damaging to the gut for many and all those issues. It can mimic the thyroid and thus could be the very culprit or reason why we're attacking our thyroid.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that could happen with other foods too. I mean, gluten is one. It can happen with dairy. There could be molecular mimicry with other things.
God.
But also, there are people, of course, who don't have the genetics for it. But in those situations, there still could be a gluten sensitivity or an intolerance. And so, that can become an issue. And then because so much gluten is grown with glyphosates, especially here in the US, the compound of gluten and glyphosate together, you can have an immune reaction to that compound because it's a completely unnatural thing that the body doesn't know.
For sure.
And then we can have sensitivities to other foods. I mean, sometimes we could have a sensitivity to broccoli, as healthy as it is, right? So it is helpful to know what foods your body reacts to. And that could be, I think, the best way to look at that is through an elimination diet. And like you said, introducing back in So we know. However, there are some tests out there with IgG or IgA antibodies. Those tests are never going to be 100% because you react to foods on a lot of different pathways. So there's no one like end all be all kind of test, but it does give you some indication about some of the things. If you're forming an antibody against the food, there's something going on, whether you feel it or not. And so by taking those things out, and with gluten, for a lot of people, that can be more of a um, permanent thing. Whereas with other foods, if we take them out, heal the gut, we may, in a lot of cases, be able to eat them again and digest them and process them. But it's just about going through the healing first. And so, but by doing that and kind of giving that break from those foods, it frees up space in your immune system, right? Because the whole point of why the immune system gets confused is that it's very busy. Like, can you imagine not sleeping for 3 days because you're just working or taking care of the kids or all of the above, right? By
Yeah,
the fourth day, you may put your keys in the refrigerator and then wonder, what did I do with my keys, right? Like, you don't even know what's happening. And so that's
totally.
kind of what happens when the immune system is constantly, I mean, think about it. It's dealing with all the stress, which we'll talk about in a second, right? It's trying to deal with these foods and inflammatory things that happen from the foods, right? And then we have the other buckets. It literally is sleep deprived. Like, it doesn't know what to do next. And so it gets very hypervigilant. So it's like, let me shoot first and ask later because I don't know what's happening here. So everyone must be bad, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I mean, I think I think it's so insane, honestly, insane the volume of autoimmune patients we have in this country and the level of struggle and burden women have when they struggle with autoimmunity. I mean, a big reason people finally find the door of Ayurveda that I teach is because they've tried everything. They went to endocrinology, they went to rheumatology. They were told, "Yep, you have an autoimmune condition. These are your biologics. Like, this is your chronic medication plan for life." Then they're like, "Well, I need some other options. I can't just keep struggling with symptoms and the medications cover me somewhat." Cairo. And then they start going down the pathway, all the different ideas, functional medicine going to you. And then finally, if they don't find a great functional medicine practitioner and they're keeping going down that line, they finally find Ayurveda. And so I just think this battle cry of understand what you're eating and how it's causing a chaos storm inside of you needs to keep being said again and again, because until we bring the awareness to it, we're going to keep struggling with it. And I will get to nutrients that we do need, because the food bucket you're talking about is like all the things that inflame you, true. And then what happens is many of us give up all the bad foods. Like, I'm one of those people. I don't eat gluten. I avoid sugar, pretty much avoid alcohol, dairy. I've brought down to just Parmesan. I don't eat meat because I'm vegetarian, which is its own big struggle when it comes to protein and its own nutrient deficiencies. And then you're like, well, what am I eating? And I think that's a big struggle as well, is eating for the autoimmune patient to actually get the nutrition they need.
Yeah.
So will you continue on down with your buckets for sure?
Yes. I just wanted to comment on one thing you said about that, when people take thyroid medicine, they go on their merry way, not doing that. But what's also interesting that a lot of people don't realize, and I find a lot of doctors don't explain, is that when they put people on thyroid medicine, sometimes their hormones, their thyroid hormones, do become optimal, right? So maybe someone had a very high TSH and then they had low hormones and they go on levothyroxine and everything looks picture perfect. And yet they're not feeling better.
Yeah.
So in those situations, all of the symptoms, right? The weight gain and the fatigue and the brain fog and the hair loss and digestive issues and all the things that come with thyroid can come just as much from a thyroid being slow as the inflammation that happens from the immune system actually attacking the thyroid. Because when that attack happens, yes, of course, it happens here locally in thyroid, which damages the thyroid, but the autoimmune attack can also be systemic, which is why it can create the fatigue or the joint pain or things that you don't necessarily think are related. So I think it's important for people to understand that, because oftentimes they're like, well, I'm already on thyroid medicine. And doctors will say, well, there's nothing else you can do. You're already on thyroid medicine. So this must not be thyroid related. This is something else. You're depressed or you're too stressed or whatever it is. But it's that autoimmune attack that's creating the same symptoms, even if your thyroid is supported, which is why, we want to really address it from both sides like that. Um,
Absolutely.
And so with the buckets, so we talked about the food bucket. So then we have our infections bucket. So these are infections, so things like Epstein-Barr, which is a virus that's very, very common. We've all been exposed to it, and it never actually leaves the body. It sort of stays under the surface. It's in our DNA. And if we're under stress or if we have another infection, like with COVID, for example, a lot of times Epstein-Barr will reactivate and the inflammation from COVID can create that. And that virus, I mean, sometimes people are acutely ill, but a lot of the time it's not like, you have a fever and you have a sore throat or you have a runny nose, right? It's more just like that low grade fatigue and maybe
Mhm.
like a slight sore throat or maybe just feeling kind of virally, but it's not terrible. And so that virus it reactivated, but it's under the surface. And so what the immune system does is it goes after it. Right. And then maybe on top of that, we also have candida, which is a type of yeast. Maybe we have H. pylori, which is a bacteria that lives in the stomach. Maybe we have other types of viruses. Maybe, there's parasites, right? I mean, there's so many different things we can have. So kind of goes back to that same idea of the immune system being tired, right? It's fighting this virus and this and this. And it's trying, right? It's going, 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 but it can't quite get it because it's all kind of chronic under the surface. So similarly to food, right? It can have cross reactivity with the types of bugs because there's certain bugs, the viruses, bacteria that actually have similarity to the thyroid. So it can
Mm,
attack that way. Or it could also just be from being really tired and not sleeping for 3 days and getting confused because it's just really tired.
sure.
So that's the infections. And, I always tell people like, it doesn't mean you have to be very sick, right? Because people think, oh, well, I don't have anything in the infection buckets because I'm okay, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes underlying candida could feel like annoying bloating that most people think is just normal because that's what a lot of providers say. Oh, you're just getting older. That's
Right.
just what happens.
Yeah. True. True. And it might be subtle symptoms, not full blown. So you may not catch it.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly. And then the
That's,
next bucket is the toxin bucket. So these are toxins that we're exposed to. And I know you talk a lot about this
yeah.
on your show, right? Everything from our environment, right? Foods, but also, we have heavy metals and molds. I mean, there's so many different things. And our liver is responsible for detoxifying that. But interestingly enough, a lot of people don't realize that the thyroid actually controls a big part of what the liver does. So if our thyroid is not optimal, the liver's not going to be optimal. And then it's this like double, triple, quadruple whammy that
Mhm.
happens. And so similarly with toxins, right? It's just a lot of burden on the body. And the immune system is like, oh, now I got to deal with you on top of you on top of you, right?
Yeah. And it deprioritizes. Like, how many priorities can you have?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot more complicated pathways there, but in a nutshell, it's just extra things that create confusion. And then last but not least is the stress bucket. And so with the stress bucket, and you and I talked a lot about that when you were on my show. And I know that's a big topic you cover here, but it's physical stress, it's emotional stress, it's all of those things. And it's, when your nervous system is upregulated, it's going to affect your immune system directly, right? The higher the cortisol, the lower and more confused our immune system is in a nutshell.
Absolutely. It's a big one. And I wonder if, I mean, my book just published and I've been teaching so much about it. And anytime I do a big project that's stressful and that really puts such a tremendous stress on my entire system, I always think, how is it that most of us are going through life at this pace
Yeah.
all the time? And as a mom, for example, even if I'm taking a big break post book one, it's not like the children don't have
Mhm.
big things that happen and you're like, whoa, we deal with chronic stress all the time. If you're watching the news right now in this world, who wouldn't be at maximum stress levels wondering what's happening and what's coming for us? And so I just wonder sometimes if women's bodies were not meant to, and I know the answer, but curious about your thoughts. I don't think we're meant to live under 24/7 stress, consume 24/7 news, all this bombardment with stressors that are small but feel big to us because of the society we're living in. And then you couple it with the other buckets, and the body's like, and we're done. I give up. I can't. If you're going to eat badly, you're going to sit there with heavy metals all over between your teeth and all the other exposures you've had. And then on top of it, I've got low grade infections that you won't even pay attention to because you have no time.
Yeah.
Then you couple stress on top, and it's like the straw that broke the camel's back,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? It's just
Exactly.
too much for
Exactly.
the system. And then transitioning from that thought, which we know stress is a problem and we all know we need to manage it better. For me, I do that so much from the Ayurveda perspective. I think of it as dinacharya, the daily self care rituals that I do every day that are detoxing, but also give me those little breaks. Like I teach about tea time is beat time, and
I
I
love that.
pause to do my meditation in the morning, even if it's a minute. Like build in those little breaks so your nervous system even remembers to be in parasympathetic, to be in rest and digest mode and chill. So that when we do catch ourselves in those high stress moments, we can tune right back in quickly to, is this really a stressor or am I just stressing out? Maybe I don't need to right now.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the thyroid and we know stress and all these buckets are affecting, I know that thyroid is one of the most nutritionally demanding organs in the body. It needs selenium, it needs iodine, zinc, vitamin B, all the B vitamins, really, vitamin D. So it needs all of those just to function and convert our hormones. So,
Yes.
will you walk us through some of these key nutrients, and that might be just a few of them, and what they each do, how these deficiencies show up? Because I think most women have no idea their thyroid is starving. And I also think that when we're going through life at the speed we are, with the level of responsibilities and work we all have, when someone gives us a magic pill, when they're like, here's your thyroid medication, you're covered, you're good. We might
Yeah.
think, okay, I'm covered, I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
doing the thing, I'm taking that one pill every day, I'm committed. But then if no one is testing in your blood work and saying, like I just recently did huge blood work, it's like low iodine, low D, low B, low zinc,
Mm.
all the things. And I looked at it, I was like, those are called the precursors for your thyroid. Do you
Yes.
realize you're not supporting thyroid from the ground up? No wonder you're tired. Like, this is so
Mhm.
easy to understand. And as much thyroid hormone as you're trying to give over the top and say, hey, I'm supporting you, are you forgetting the foundation piece, kind of like forgetting the autoimmune piece? So will
Yeah.
you get into that for us? Because also, as much as I want to do those things, sometimes it's hard to do it all in a given day. So, like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of different nutrients that you need for your thyroid because your thyroid supports your whole body. So it's a demanding organ because it gives so much. And there's three different things that we want to think about with the thyroid. So the first is how the thyroid actually makes and produces the hormones, because some of that happens within the thyroid. And actually, even before that, TSH is not even a thyroid hormone. It's actually a pituitary hormone. And so it's the pituitary that signals the thyroid to produce hormones. So it's how are we supporting the pituitary, right? And the adrenal glands to help to signal the thyroid. From there, we want the thyroid to produce its hormone, specifically T4. But then T4 is really the inactive hormone. It's the T3 that's active. And T3 is not produced very much in the thyroid. T3 is something that the body converts T4 into in other areas like the liver and the gut. And so you need you need nutrients for the enzymes that do that conversion, right? So we have those three things. And then the fourth thing, sorry, I said three, but it's really four, is the autoimmune piece because we were saying that so many people actually have thyroid autoimmunity. What are we doing? How are we supporting the immune system? So yes, we have those buckets, but there's nutrients that are going to be helpful to strengthen and balance the immune system. Because with autoimmunity, we want to be very careful about stimulating the immune system because I think so often the conversation is, oh, our immune system is weak or we need to fight a cold. Like, let's boost the immune system, stimulate, right? Boost. But in autoimmunity, we don't want to boost because what's going to happen is when you boost the whole immune system, yeah, you're going to fight this cold better. What else are you going to fight better?
Your
The
thyroid.
thyroid, right?
Yeah.
And any other things that your immune system is already reacting to. But so think of it as like playing flag football, right? You have a flag on the thyroid or on any other organs that it's attacking. So when it goes up, it's going to go after anything with a flag. And so it's about that balance. And so some of the nutrients that you mentioned are really big. And there's some interesting things about those nutrients. So let's talk about iodine first, just because I think there's a lot of misinformation and controversy about that. So yes, it is true. You need iodine to make your thyroid hormones. That is true. And when you have Hashimoto's, there is a lot of research that iodine, especially in higher doses, is going to be contraindicated and can create inflammation. Iodine with Hashimoto's can raise TSH, It can actually create an increase in thyroid antibodies, which means more inflammation on the thyroid. It can cause your thyroid to become inflamed. And I've been there, I've tried it. So I'm speaking from not only research, but very personal experience too. About, I would say 20 years ago, there was a lot of talk about high dose iodine and how that can be really, really helpful for, this, that, and the other. They were talking about the miracle, quote unquote cure for things.
Mm.
But no one actually talked about the role in Hashimoto's. And so many thyroid people have Hashimoto's, right? And I've had such a flare up with that when I tried that protocol, and so many other people that I know did too. And, there was talk that, oh, well, if you react to iodine, it could be because you may not have enough selenium or there's other stuff. And that's just not, from everything we're seeing in the research, that's just not it. When you have Hashimoto's, you have to be careful with iodine. Now,
Mm.
the question then becomes, well, what if you're deficient in iodine? What do you do?
Yeah.
And it's a tough question. And, most experts believe that you still don't want to do high iodine, even if you're deficient,
Sure.
because you're going to create more of this immune attack. So the way that I like to look at it, of course, it's individual, person to person, right? But if someone is very, very deficient, we may just do a tiny, tiny bit for a little while, but it depends on the type of immune balance that you have. So one of the things that you can have with Hashimoto is you can have a thyroid type, which is basically the type of slowdown that you have, which kind of shows us where we have to support the thyroid. There's 5 thyroid types that are the most common. And then additionally, you can have different types of immune response. So you can have an immune response that's more calm, or you can have an immune response that's more agitated. And if your immune response is agitated, you will tend to have fluctuations in TSH, sometimes month to month, like based on your cycle or based on other things,
Sure.
stress or other types of toxins. And so if you have this agitated immune response and this up and down TSH, even if you don't change your thyroid medicine, that means there's constantly attack and flare. So in those situations specifically, we really don't want to do iodine. In fact, research shows that doing no iodine and even doing a low iodine diet
Mm.
can actually help to bring down that over agitated immune response.
Wow.
But if someone's immune response is calm and they're extremely, extremely deficient, we could, there's, depending on the person, there's ways to do, but a little bit. And that's, in micrograms, because some of that research in the past, when they talked about high dose, we're talking about iodine in milligrams, right? Mostly, like if you look at a multivitamin, a typical multivitamin is going to be anywhere between about 200 and 300 micrograms.
Mm.
Those protocols were 50 milligrams. So
Wow.
really, really high. And that's
Very high.
definitely a problem. So it is person specific, but typically if you have Hashimoto's, you want to be careful with that. If you don't have Hashimoto's, in cases where you do truly have hypothyroidism without Hashimoto's, then iodine is okay. And if someone's deficient, you can do more. Obviously, you want to speak to your doctor about changing anything, but if they're okay with it. Uh, Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too with iodine is it's a little tricky in terms of testing.
Mm.
And I don't think that there is really like an end all be all test either, right? Because you can look in blood, but that's going to fluctuate based on what you eat and from day to day. You can look at urine, but there are some people who said if you look at urine iodine excretion, right, if whether it's provoked or unprovoked, so that could be a little tricky. There's another way to look at iodine where you put a little patch of iodine solution, on your forearm and see how quickly it absorbs. And if it absorbs really well, it means you need it. But it's still not 100%. So I think that it also can be tricky that if a test shows you're low in iodine in blood, right, that may not be 100% accurate. And maybe doing it in urine and kind of doing it a few different ways to see if that's really true.
Got it. Okay. Super
Yeah.
interesting. I actually have taken iodine, and every single time I did, I hated it. And so I
What
just
did you
stopped
feel?
doing that to myself. I just didn't feel good. I felt
Mm,
weird. And I was like, well, my body doesn't like this and I'm not doing it again.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to listen to that, right? Sometimes we try to override our body's
Yeah.
message. But I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought up this distinction. It's a very specific distinction where many people, like in my case, I just showed up low iodine. But if I have Hashimoto's, then it doesn't make sense to try to really push that. And most people listening to the podcast might not realize that distinction. So thank you for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then talking about some other nutrients, another really big one is selenium. And there is So much research on selenium. So, and by the way, too, I know that you talk about this a lot. Our soils are so depleted. We're not
Yes.
getting the vitamins and minerals we used to 50 years ago. So when people used to say, "Hey, just eat 2 Brazil nuts," right? It doesn't really work the same anymore. So we need adequate amounts of selenium. Now, selenium is important for several different things. So first, and there's research done on selenium where it can help with TSH sensitivity, meaning
Mm,
that when the thyroid gets stimulated, the TSH is going, it's not going to go up as much. So if you have higher TSH, there could be more sensitivity so that it's more in a normal range. And then there's also research that shows that when you supplement with selenium, it can lower your thyroid antibodies, which is huge because we know those thyroid antibodies are a sign of inflammation and that immune system attack. And selenium is also helpful in converting T4 to T3 in the peripheral tissues. So it's really, really important. And then inositol is another big one. And actually, the study on selenium was done together with inositol. And inositol and selenium is together help to sensitize TSH and lower thyroid antibodies. Inositol also can be calming to the system, can help with sleep, and I've used inositol a lot myself in my practice. I actually even use it on my son. He has, and children can get that sometimes where they can have a higher TSH but completely normal thyroid hormones, and they can actually be more hyperactive because things work a little bit differently in kids.
mm,
So we've been doing inositol with him, and I've seen some really good changes with that. And you don't need a lot. It's about 600 of inositol, and with selenium, it was 200 micrograms that research was, well, the research actually was done on 83. We usually use 200 just to make sure that people have enough, but the research was done on 600 selenium and 83 micrograms of selenium. Now, another nutrient that's very important is zinc. And most people don't get enough zinc,
no.
and most people are zinc deficient. Interestingly enough, I learned this when I was going through my journey that it's a generational thing.
Oh,
So, zinc deficiency, if your mother, it could go up to 4 generations. And so it passes through, and unless you supplement, and if there's not enough in your food, you're not going to catch up. I was very severely zinc deficient, and it's interesting because zinc affects so many different things.
yeah.
For thyroid specifically, it helps with that conversion, but it also helps with DNA replication and growth and skin and hair. Immune system, it's a really, really big one for that balance, not the boosting, but the balance. And one of the things I noticed when I was younger is, well, I see it now. I'm like, I have all of these stretch marks. I mean,
Mm,
they're white now. You can't see them much, but they're there. I've been the same weight my whole life. I've never gained or lost weight, right? Not even in pregnancy, really. And like, I don't have stretch marks from that. I got my stretch marks when I was growing, right?
mm,
10, 11, 12. And that was the time before I did all the work that I did on my body. And I was very zinc deficient. And so that is going to affect skin as
wow.
well. And, I see the same with my mom and even so the same with my grandma. So I can see that generational effect. And for me, also interestingly, I had high copper, which is very, very common for women, especially. And that could be due to drinking water that goes through copper pipes. It could be because of birth control pills, which, they're still used a lot now, but I think 10, 20 years ago, they were used even more.
Sure.
Um, and copper and zinc are like antagonists. And so when you have too much copper, it's going to lower zinc. So if you're already zinc deficient and you have higher copper, it's this imbalance that happens. And when someone's zinc deficient and they have high copper, there's a significant amount of zinc that they need, not forever,
Yeah.
but depending on the person, it could be between 3, 6, maybe 9 months, where they may need 120 to 150 milligrams of zinc, which is a high dose. Now, again, you wouldn't just start supplementing that. You'd want to test. I like doing hair analysis so you could see that tissue mineral levels. I also like looking at red blood cell zinc and copper as well, so you could see. But if you have the high copper, that can really affect it. But
Okay.
what I find with most multivitamins,
Mm,
they'll have maybe 5 milligrams of zinc,
nothing.
maybe 8
Yeah.
if you're lucky. And they have a good amount of copper, but for most people, they need the balance to be reversed.
Right.
So I like for people to have at least 30. And you're not going to find typically a vitamin that has all of that in the past, right? And so people would have to take it separately.
Correct. There's so much more that I know we could talk about when it comes to the nutrients. And B vitamins is something I've talked about a lot on this podcast with different guests and methylation and all those things, which is another key nutrient. I know for myself, I'm aware of all these different supplements I'm supposed to take, but my supplement drawer is already big enough. Like I'm already supposed to take 30 a day, and it's a behemoth task to take so many supplements on all the timings to get what we need. And I know that in your case, after having a practice and working with clients for so long, you created your own formula that kind of brought everything together for us. So I wanted you to cover that briefly, just so my audience can hear and listen in, because oftentimes when women find me and they want to work with me, they're like, okay, but I can't take 30 supplements in a day. Do you have something that brought it all together? So will you
Yeah.
share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it was for those exact reasons. It's how do people get all the things that they need, but also
Mhm.
in the right forms, right? In the right dosages and something that's going to be really pure and tested and natural. So it's called Thyroid Love. And the reason for the name is because in thyroid autoimmunity, our body doesn't like our thyroid, right? So thyroid love is so that your body can start to love your thyroid again because that's what it's all about. And it's meant for anyone who has an underactive thyroid or thyroid autoimmunity because so often when people have a thyroid issue, right, they go and they find a general thyroid supplement. But guess what? It's going to have a lot of iodine, which if they have thyroid autoimmunity, like Hashimoto's, they can't take, right? They also, a lot of the thyroid supplements, just have a few things that are for thyroid, but they're not doing things that are going to be helpful for the immune system as well. And we need both. So with Thyroid Love, it's actually 26 nutrients that are specific to help both the thyroid and that immune system balance. So we have the zinc at 30 milligrams, which is higher than you'll find in any multivitamin. The selenium, the inositol, most supplements, you have to take inositol separately, but this has it all together. It's got the B vitamins in the right methylated form because with methylation, you don't want it to be synthetic. But you also don't want to over methylate. That's like a whole other podcast we can talk about. But
Yeah.
it's like that right balance in there, right? The right balance of copper. Vitamin D is really important. I know you were sharing, about so many people being low in vitamin
Yeah.
D. Um, excuse me. So vitamin D, we need for our immune system and the balance of that. And then there's vitamin C, but in a form that doesn't have corn. Most vitamin C comes from corn, but corn can
Wow.
be a trigger with thyroid autoimmunity.
Yeah.
And so we combine all of that together so that when people have a thyroid issue, they can take it and it gives them everything in one. And on top of that, if they have thyroid autoimmunity, which is probable for
Yeah.
most, they're not getting anything that's contraindicated and they're getting that immune system balance support.
That's a big deal. And I love that you put it all together in one. I'm glad that you thought through this in great detail. For me, I'm always looking for those solutions because again, so many women come to me and they're like, I cannot take all that separately. That's a lot of work. And so because this is your specialty, this is what you focus on. I'm so glad you put those higher doses in. That's also a big deal. A lot of times we're taking supplements that are so low dose, we're still not getting the impact we want. And so thank you. I'm excited for that. I can't wait to try it myself because I know that I'm on that journey always when it comes to thyroid support and now in perimenopause, everything else support as well coming in.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
before we wrap today, because I know we both have I know you and I could both talk forever because this happened when I was on your podcast. I was like, "Oh my gosh, she knows so much about all these things that so many of us as women want to learn about." So, everyone who's listening, I would love for you to share where they can find you, your podcast, and Thyro Love as well.
Absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. I'm just at Ina Topiler on Instagram. My podcast is called Thyroid Mystery Solved, Hashimoto's and Hypothyroidism Revealed. You were on the podcast, and we have so many great guests like you. Anywhere that they listen to podcasts, they can find that. And then for Thyro Love, it's just thyrolove.com. And we have a special discount also for your audience, which is inflammation 15. So if anyone wanted to try it, they can get that discount.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I learned so much. To all my listeners who listened in, share this episode with someone you love who needs to hear this. Leave a review, comment below. That's how we get this wisdom out in the world from amazing practitioners like Ina. And I can't wait to see you guys next week for the next episode. Thanks, everyone.